Hey everyone, and welcome to the Irenic Ref podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gross. The word Irenic means aimed at or aiming towards peace. And my goal with this podcast is to try to create a bridge between coaches and officials by showing the humanity of each other in a more robust way, which isn't always achievable in the minimal interaction the coach and official may experience during a game. With all that said, let's get to it. Today's guest has been coaching for over 40 years and officiating for the past 8 years. He led the Hamlin girls to a 24-0 state championship and appeared in the state tournament 2 additional times with the Castlewood boys. He has around 360 career wins and has coached at 7 different schools. And again, something different with our guest this evening is he started officiating when most people start retiring. He started officiating in 2015 at the age of 55. And just last year, he received his first selection as a state tournament official. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Rasmussen. John, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, nice to be with you. I've been nervous since you reached out a few weeks ago about this, so hopefully it goes well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're just having a conversation here, John. So the first thing I want to talk about, I didn't really mention it in the intro because I thought it was something significant, and I'll name drop here a little bit. I reached out to a guy by the name of Ryan Deal. I think you know that name, sports writer. Maybe not. I think he writes for 605 Sports. So everyone should check out his work there. But I reached out to him to confirm something, and he said he thinks, but he wasn't for sure. He was going to do a little more digging. I asked, has anyone ever played in a state basketball tournament, coached in a state basketball tournament, and officiated in a state basketball tournament? And he could not think of one. And I asked that because, John, you have done all 3 of those. Is that correct?
That's correct. So yeah.
Have you heard anything different about that? Has anyone ever said anyone else has done that?
When it first dawned on me, I kind of started going through some people, and a couple of names came to mind. Wayne Carney. I don't know if he had played in a state basketball tournament, but I know he was an official and a really good basketball coach. And then over at DeSmit, what is the name? Oh, legendary coach at DeSmit. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Is it? I mean, the only recent one I know is the Grunhagen.
Well, before Mark McCune.
Jeez. Okay. Yep.
You know, I know he played in a state basketball tournament. He's, obviously coached in a state basketball tournament, numerous state championships. And I know he was an official at one time. So I think those 2 names come to mind. Okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see if Ryan will get back to me on that, but I think it's something that's noteworthy, especially because most people, like I said in the intro, they don't start getting into officiating when they think they're done with coaching. They tend to just sit on the sidelines and just enjoy the game. But I think you enjoy the game too much to just kind of let it sit that way. Is that right?
I want to stay involved, and this was a good way. As a coach, you have a whistle in your mouth every day at practice. Yep. You're making calls all the time. You're not making calls at times to get your kids to fight through a non-call. You're making some touchy calls and all that kind of stuff, and you get some feedback from your kids and everything like that. So it was close to one of the last practices that I had with the Castlewood boys that I thought, maybe I should try going into officiating after this. And I went into the locker room, and at the time, the officials were getting ready for a girls' game that night. And Fodness comes in, the superintendent, with the checks. And I go, how much you pay those guys? And he goes, way too much. And I said, well, I'm thinking about going into officiating. I said, I've never missed a call from the bench. And I thought I'd get a laugh out of those officials, but they all kind of gave me a dirty look.
Oh, no. That's good. Yeah, I was kind of going to ask about that, the transition between coaching and officiating. Was it because like we talked about, you loved the game, you wanted to give back? Was there an interaction you had with an official that caused that, or just kind of a want to stay connected?
Well, when I was younger, I was like a junior and a senior. I would go down to the city auditorium in Watertown and officiate City League men's basketball.
Yeah.
And that was tough. That was tough. And then I went on to college. I played college football at Northern, but then I went down and I got involved with officiating the City League in Aberdeen, which was pretty good basketball. And so I had kind of a little bit of experience with it, but my life goal was to coach. And so I just pretty much stayed with that. And then throughout the years in coaching, I ran into a lot of really good officials, and a couple of guys that came out of Watertown, Kurt Ersman and Brian, Stemwhittle. I remember having them numerous times. And what I liked about those officials is that they would let you talk to them. Okay. You had a concern or anything. And so I thought, well, after all the years of coaching, and I was pretty tough on officials, to the point where, I had to calm down and not embarrass myself, my team, my family, the school, that type of thing. And I thought, well, once I become an official, I'm going to be able, I want to be that type of person like Stemwhittle and Ersman, where if you had a question from a coach, then I'm going to stand, near, and we're going to talk it out.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's good to hear and good to know. And I think that's something to take home for every official is, just lend that coach an ear and let them at least hear them out and what they have to say. And then if it just don't agree, then we can move on with it, hopefully. But yeah, let's get a little bit more into your personal life, who you are, your family, some hobbies. Go ahead and just tell us a little bit about that stuff.
Well, like I said, I'm originally from Watertown and had really good experience playing sports in Watertown, and had some outstanding coaches, track, basketball, football, and that inspired me to go into coaching. And so when I talked to people, they said, well, if you're going to be a coach, you want to go to Northern. That's where the coaches go. And so I decided to go to Northern, played football, got my coaching degree, and then started off at South Shore. In the meantime, starting off my first job, I got married that summer to Lori Snyder, and we've been married for close to 45 years now. And we had 2 children. I got a daughter who lives right here in Volga. Her husband's Matt Cadwell. Matt.
Yep.
We got together a few years ago and started this experience with officiating. And then I have a son who's living in Minneapolis right now, and he's working with a company that helps school districts with their websites and that type of thing. He's kind of into education right now too, a little bit. And so over the years, it's just been kind of starting off at the Class B level in basketball. And also, all these years, I also been coaching football at some level and track. And so, 3 seasons out of the year, I stay busy. And that's kind of when I gave up coaching. That was kind of the idea was, stay busy. I've been at all my life. And so it worked out really well. And I worked from the Class B level to Class A at Hamlin and Redfield. And then I went to the AA level at Brookings. And then Class or in girls basketball, I've been at the Class B and Class A level. And so the only one I haven't been to is Double A, but that's not going to happen in girls.
So you talked about coaching, you talked about officiating, even some football in there, some track in there. Is there any other hobbies? You got like, do you golf? Do you play beanbag, something like that?
Yeah, not, I do a little golfing. I've worked at a golf course for 18 seasons on the grounds. And if I tell you what, if you want to ruin your golf game, work at a golf course, because by the time you get done, you don't want to go back and play. So I still play a little bit. I still involved with middle school football and at Sioux Valley, and Matt Cadwell and I are coaching that together. And other than that, family, the Cadwells, a shout out to them. They have 6 kids. So I have 6 grandkids with them from age 10 all the way down to about 2 months. And so it's going to be a lot of years of following those guys around.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Yeah, I just remember, I said this on another show, but I just remember my grandparents, every time it seemed like I had a game or I had an event, they'd always be there for the most part. And it's kind of crazy how, you're invested in your kids within your grandkids. It's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah. I missed the oldest one's football game the other day, and he scored a touchdown, and it's his first one. He's in 4th grade. And Matt goes, "Well, you'll never live that down. He'll never let you live down that you missed it."
Yeah. Well, yeah, you'll probably get to see plenty more, but that first one is kind of an interesting one. So you talked about some guys in that area that someone had an influence of you to start officiating. Let's even go both directions. Who was an influence for you to start coaching? Is that something just in your family? And then along with that, were there some people who influenced you to get into officiating, besides Matt and besides like the Brian you talked about and the other one?
Mm-hmm. With coaching, like I said, it started with my high school coaches. And once I got into coaching, I met a guy named Darwin Hofer, or no, excuse me, Dave Hofer. At the time, he was at Coleman, and a job opened up midway through. I was going to South Dakota State at the time, midway through the school year. And they said, come on down. You can be assistant boys basketball and assistant track under this Dave Hofer. And I said, hey, that sounds really good. And from that experience, Hof kind of was my mentor for many years. He became coach at Yankton at one time, boys coach, and really helped me out. And then he had some health issues and then passed away at an early age. And it was quite devastating to, everybody that knew Hof. And when I started at South Shore, Ron Jensen was my assistant coach, and I'm like 24 years old, and he was right around 40. And so he had a big influence on me. And I learned a lot from Ronnie. He's still doing well up at South Shore. He had some really good kids that I was able to coach. And then a couple of his daughters, after I left, they finished undefeated state champions, Waverly South Shore girls basketball. And his son-in-law is the head boys coach at Brandon Valley, Nelson.
Okay.
And so over the years, those people really helped with the basketball and coaching. And then with officiating, the area officials like Pete and Gary and Terry Duffy and James Benning and guys like that, when I said, well, I'm going to go into this. And, I went to the regional meeting, and that was kind of weird because, now I coached all these years, I'm sitting around with these officials that I used to chew up. And they go, hey, that's kind of about the time 3-man go a bit more at the Class B and levels and so forth. And they go, hey, we'll bring you along, And Gary, I remember Gary saying, "Well, you'll do fine because you know the game." And I think that helps a little along the way, that you got the experience as a player and as a coach, and all the years of watching basketball. You kind of know the game. The biggest challenge was the mechanics
Mm-hmm.
and thing. And so once that kind of stuff fell into place, it kind of went my way. And then I got to give a shout out to Paul Seville down at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And when I first started off, I'd I'd go down on a weekend and work about 22 games. I couldn't hardly walk when I went to school on Monday. And, and he kept having me come back and work in these youth basketball games. And I'm still doing those to this point right now. I still go down, and I don't do as many to try to kind of conserve my body a little bit. But I tell you what, Matt Cadwell and I went down, and we probably worked well over 1,000 games. And we talk about this all the time. People that want to go into officiating, if you can get yourself into that kind of situation and work all those games, you're going to get some heat. You're going to get heat from the parents. You're going to get heat from the coaches and even the players. But you believe in yourself, and you're always thinking about getting better. All those games just help tremendously, because I've seen that. I get in a situation. Oh, yep, I've seen that before. Here's where we're going to go with that, and trial and error and that type of thing. You kind of, and then you kind of work on your mechanics. Oh, I'm gonna work on this, especially when they got rid of the punch.
Mm-hmm.
Go with the hand behind. You kind of just work on all those kinds of things during those youth games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it helps, like what you were talking about. Oh, I've seen this. It's a catalog in your head. It's like, okay, I've seen this play before, and now I can be slower with my whistle, because I
Mm-hmm.
know that. And not necessarily we're not calling a foul. We're seeing a play happen, and we're like, okay, that's a good play. We're going to let this kid score the basket, and we're going to keep going here. Or
Yep.
if we were to blow it too soon, we'd take a layup away from a guy, and
Mm-hmm.
we're like, we don't want to do that either. And so we catalog the play, being like, oh, I might have called that one a little quick this time. Maybe next
Yep.
time I'll wait a half a second and see what he can do with this. And you kind of
Yep.
alluded to that when you were saying in your practices, you would maybe get a quick one on your players to say, hey, stop doing
Mm-hmm.
that, or you would let them play through something to see what would happen there.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you as an official, I mean, you talk about games over and over, catalog. How do you approach a game where you're like, or any sort of situation where you're like, I need to work on this? Do you just say that over in your head, like, I'm going to work on this throughout this game? Or how do you mentally go about working on something that you want to work on?
Um, Went down to the Pentagon. They had a major college game going on, and John Higgins was one of the officials, and along with the other two, and they came in and they did kind of a little clinic. I don't know. Did you go to that at all?
I'm trying to remember. I don't know if it was that one. I went to another one when Kelly Pfeiffer was there, so I'm not sure if that's the same one or not.
You know, he might have been. Yeah, I think he was there at the time. And one of the things Higgins said um, that really stuck with me is he says how he's going to approach that game that night. He says, I'm going to start off slow, and I'm going to back it down from there. So I go into each game thinking I'm just going to start off slow and get slower from there in terms of how I see things and how I do my mechanics, and just have that calming little thing in my head in terms of how I approach things. But every game is different. I come away from every game. I do a lot of games with Matt. I do a lot of games with Jordan Fast, and every time, at the half, or even before the game, at half, after the game, on the ride home, we're talking about everything and how we
Mm-hmm.
can.
Yeah, and so when you say slow it down, you're talking about just perception, or explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, just how you're seeing the game. Just don't get too fast with stuff, you know, slow things down. You make your call, you know, you give your preliminary, you're doing, you know, you go to the table, everything's kind of just a slow process a little bit because I found when I first started, if you speed up, that's when you make mistakes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that question. If when you were first starting, did you find yourself going a little too fast at the beginning? And
I remember when I went to my first jamboree at Brookings Middle School,
yeah,
and area, you know, beers and those guys were all there. I mean, I was sucking air so much, you know, and they just say, "Hey, you just got to calm down here a little bit. Calm down." You know, you're just going so fast.
yeah, for sure. So that's kind of a fun story about officiating, but I'm sure you've got a few more that you can share with us. So even coaching as well. Tell me a fun story you have about officiating, and tell me a fun story you've had about coaching, whether that's a team, whether that's an interaction, whether that's a memorable experience, anything like that.
Um, you know, I've had so many different jobs over the years. You know, you're always trying to work your way up a little further and so forth like that. So I always, right now in this part of my life, I get kind of confused in decades sometimes. But I, one of the coaching stories was I'm coaching the Castlewood boys in Esteline, and it's a close game. And throughout most of that year, I only went 6 deep. And so we ended up, I think, winning by 19. And on my way to the locker room, um, uh, I hear this, hey, coach, wait up. And I turn around and there's a guy wheeling a gal in a wheelchair. And I go, yeah, what's going on? She goes, how many players did you play tonight? And I look at my assistant and I go, we played 6, right? He goes, yep, we played 6. She goes, well, that's BS. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, is this a grandmother of one of my bench players that I didn't get into the game that night? So I went into the locker room and I go, hey, who's got a grandma that lives in Esteline? And they're all looking at me like, we don't. It just happened to be, an Esteline fan that was just mad that because we won by 19, I didn't play enough players. So the next day I go to school and the custodian I started talking to him about it. He's familiar with the people up in Esteline, and he knew who that person was, and never thought anything about it. Next day, I have a student teacher that was out in the gym uh, doing class, and Lou Egerbrotten, who used to be the secretary for the AD at Brookings, happened to be subbing in the office. She comes in, she goes, John, you got a visitor? And I'm going, all right. So I look over at my door and I see wheels from a wheelchair start coming around the corner. And then a woman in a red sweater with an old lady's mask on. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, thinking, "Oh my God, what is she doing here?" And it was our head cook, who the janitor had talked to her about what happened. And I tell you what, so I took a picture and everything with her, but that one stands out as far as coaching.
That's awesome.
I'll never forget that. And then as far as officiating, it was just a little funny thing that happened. I'm doing a game, youth game down in Harrisburg, and Becky Flynn, I don't know what her married name is, but she's an outstanding player that played for Wakanda for her dad. And she's coaching her boys' youth team. And I know Ron Flynn, he's now, a legend in coaching. And he's sitting along the side. And so the ball goes out of bounds right in front of him. And it was a blue team. It went out on white. And Becky's team was wearing white. And I blew my whistle, put the hand up, and I said, boop, pointed. I said, Blues ball. And I hear Ron over there. He says, "How was that Blues ball?" So I walked over and I pretended this was this guy's first ever basketball game. And I said, "Well, sir," I said, "when it went off White's leg out of bounds, that means it's going to go Blues way. That's how it works." And he starts laughing. He goes, "Oh, that's how it works." And Cadwell was officiating with me at the time. And I told him that story. I go, "Yeah, I act like Ron Flynn never had seen a basketball game before in his life."
That's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of fun when yeah, you can have those interactions when you know the result of that is probably going to end in a good, gracious kind of interchange there. And I think that's kind of true with a lot of the coaches that we have in our state. You can, not in a rude way, but you can have a pretty straightforward and kind of sarcastic tone, and they can also respond in a sarcastic and fun way. And it makes the game a little more interesting and more fun to be a part of.
Oh, yeah. James Benning.
Yeah.
When I was coaching Castlewood, we were playing Millbank. And they sent one of my kids out of the game because he had blood on his uniform. And it was one of my better players. And a little bit later, as we're scrambling to try to get the blood off or get a new uniform, another player they sent out, his twin brother. I'm going, "What's going on here?" And pretty soon, a little bit later, a third player had to go out because of blood on their uniform. I go, "We got to figure this out." And finally, it was a Millbank kid that had his hand, they were looking around and he had his hand behind his back and he had blood on it, coming off one of the fingers. And I'm hot because there's three players. I'm trying to scramble, get uniforms on, that type of thing. And so there's a huge delay in the game because of all this. And then I said, "I want a timeout." And he's way down on the baseline. He goes, "I think we're beyond that point right now, coach. We're going to move along." I'll never forget that. He goes, "I think we're beyond that right now." So
that's very James Benning, it seems
yeah.
like.
See, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from James. James likes to talk, and he likes to talk to, from the time he hits the floor with the fans, the players, the table, all that kind of stuff. He brings that little aspect of his personality to the game, and I always appreciated that out of how James officiates.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of a fun and memorable interaction with James, or with an official. Have you, as an official, had a memorable or interaction, a good one with a coach within the past 8 years?
One thing I think, if you ask coaches about me, yeah, they might not necessarily like some of my calls or anything like that from time to time, but I don't go into a gym thinking, "Oh, I got this coach tonight." And I don't think when I enter the gym, the coaches think, "Oh, we got Rasmussen tonight."
Mm-hmm.
I try to be, one thing I haven't done in all my years of officiating, I haven't given a coach a technical foul. It's probably come close, but I'm going to do everything in my power to try to de-escalate the situation and not bring it to that. And so that's kind of what I pride myself on. And I did the state basketball tournament this year and had the third and fourth place game in the state A with Hamlin and Elk Point Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two fiery type of coaches.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they got on me a little bit, but, I kind of worked my way through and try to explain some things. And afterwards, I'm working a youth basketball tournament, and Neuendorf comes up and says, "Hey, nice job at the state basketball tournament." So that made me feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always nice to have those coaches come up to you, even after the fact. I mean, I had a similar interaction with a different coach, came up to me a week later and said the same thing. Not about the state tournament, but just about officiating in general. And so it's always nice to hear that, and kind of also gives you, like, I don't know, after the time they've had to cool down and whatnot, it kind of,
right.
We get back to this point of what I'm trying to create with this podcast is we just see the humanity in each other and just want to, congratulate each other for what we've done that year. But
Yeah.
following up with that, I like talking about rules. I'm a big rules guy. Many people don't necessarily like that, and how if you've ever been to a region meeting with me, sometimes it gets drawn out because I try to talk about rules a lot. But is there a rule that when you were coaching or when you've been officiating that you've been glad was added? And then on the flip side, was there one that you're like, I don't know if I really like that rule, or I don't like that it was added, or I wish maybe it would be modified a bit?
I don't know. I kind of go with the punches in terms of the rules. Try to learn them as best as possible. And then as a coach, you know, we took the test, and we weren't really fully invested in the rules. We
Mm-hmm.
were more X's and O's. And I remember working a boys SDSU team camp when I first started with Terry Duffy, and I started talking at halftime about what the other team needed to do to break the press. And he goes, "You got to start thinking about the officiating side of it." I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And as an official, I know you enjoy this, and I brought it up to a few people, and I go, "What's that?" But I go, "The 5 play Friday is a really good thing that now that I'm retired, I like to sit down with my cup of coffee and watch all those clips and things like that, and hear other people's viewpoints on the rules and how to administer them." Um, I don't know. I'd like to see, and I don't know what level does this, but I'd like to see at the high school level, like the 5 second closely guarded count when somebody's dribbling. I'd like to see that kind of dropped.
Yeah.
If they want to dribble around forever with a shot clock, that's fine. If they're holding the ball, that's a different story, because now the ball's dead and you got defense up and working hard. But I think if they just wanted to dribble, the thing that's going to change this year is the 5 team fouls. I
Yep.
like that. Some don't, but I kind of like that aspect. I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard both ways. The funny thing is, there are some coaches that, like, let's say De Beers, for example, he's seen his kid play with those rules in the women's college game, and the
Okay.
game has changed drastically. It's kind of kept the game at a good pace, and so I
Yeah.
think there's at some level that's going to help keep the game at a good pace. Other ones, who knows? It may be something that just doesn't affect the game at all. It's just they get 2 extra shots instead of one, which could be
Yep.
interesting in late game situations. But again, you still got to make free throws. So,
Mm-hmm.
and just one last question to follow everything up today. Being a coach, being an official, you kind of know maybe what you don't like hearing from an official and what you as an official, like to say to coaches. What's something that you would recommend to a younger official? How to, like, in a way to like start being a good official, and how to like get to be a better official, or even like interacting with coaches. How do you do that better? Maybe that whole gamut of kind of advice for a newer official.
Yeah. I mean, as an official, you got to stand by your call, and there's going to be situations where, oh man, you could kind of second guess. But when you make the call, you put, air in the whistle, you're strong with the mechanics. Even if you think you got it wrong, you got to act like you got it right. And now, if a coach wants to interact about that type of thing, there has been occasions where, I'm saying, well, you might have a case there a little bit. I really don't want to talk a whole lot, because years ago they say you can't be misquoted if you don't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of, like you said, kind of lend an ear, kind of shake the head a little bit, that you hear what's going on, and then move on from there, and don't let it compound. And next play, it's like coaching. You always tell your kids next play, next play. And so as an official, you guys tell yourself next play. You can't dwell on it.
Yep. Cool. So if I heard you right, basically, if you make a call, stick with it. But if you're still questioning it, don't let it compound. Don't keep going like, oh crud, I missed that one. And then
Yeah.
along with that, get to the next play. Let's officiate the next play and be like 100% on that next play.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. John, thanks again. I appreciate you making the time to be on the show this evening. And with that, yeah, like I said, thanks, John. Anything else you have to say?
No, hey, I appreciate your what you're doing, putting this out there, and we can always have better relationships in everything we do in life. And so, sports for you and for us is very important, and we want to do the best for the kids, and so the relationship between officials and coaches will help in that area.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree, and that's exactly why I wanted to get this rolling and start it. But yeah, thanks again, John, and everybody else. Thanks
All
for
right.
watching. Thanks for watching this evening. We'll see you next time.